And so, the Pentavive Guardians, including the new Guardian of Fire, use the power of all 5 elements to close up the breach with a new patch of all elements, sealing the veil once again. Part of this process also sucked in many of the demons and spirits like a vacuum back into the breach before it was sealed. The floating continent begins to fall, but between the guardians of earth and air, they were able to make it land safely back to the ground. Even though it may not have felt like a true victory to the guardians, they still managed to save countless lives by preventing the Fade from merging back with the rest of the world. There are still many straggling demons where the region of the Fade bubble used to lie, but over time, these demons will be eliminated, at least to a much more manageable size. The Guardians will join other heroes, including the heroes of Ferelden, to clean up the rest of the mess. But saving the world came with a price. The face of all of Thedas would be changed forever, divided into 5 different regions.
The region of diminished earth would spread across Ferelden, the Dales, the Frostbite Mountains, and Orzammar. Plants would have a much harder time growing in the land, while metals and minerals would be of far less quality.
The Orlesian Empire and Tirishan would become the region of diminished air. Air quality in general would be lower, and the land would be hit with violent storms on a regular basis.
The region of fire would encompass Anderfels, Saharon, the Donarchs, and Kalsharak. Here, people naturally grew lethargic, and energy in general would be much less efficient. Mages in the area would use more mana to cast spells, and fuel-related technology, even as simple as gas lamps, would have more difficulty functioning.
The region of diminished water would cover the Free Marches, Antiva, Ravane, and Parvolin, whatever levels receded to about 80% of their original size, and purely fresh water would be harder to come by without filtering or boiling it first.
Finally, the region of diminished aether would cover Navara and the Tevinter Imperium. Here, these regions would experience 3 months of normal day and night cycles, followed by 3 months of constant magical light, 3 months of normal day and night cycles, and then 3 months of constant magical darkness.
Thedas would now have to find ways to compensate for these regions. Fortunately, their decision ensured that 4 out of the 5 regions still had stable forms of what one region lacked. In theory, this would encourage trade between the regions. Even if it may not have felt like a victory, the fact of the matter remains that Thedas as a whole was not placed in a state that they could not recover from. As for the Guardians themselves, their powers further aided against their respected regions' shortcomings.
Wherever the Guardians were, the diminished effects of their respected regions would be nullified in an 8-mile radius of them and the Bracer. Earth would become fertile. Bodies of water would return back to their original size and quality. Violent storms would stop and grow calm. Energy would be more efficient. The darkness and light cycle would return back to normal. They even suppressed this nullification at any time they wished.
Normally, their nullification aura would span a 10-mile radius, but with one of the original Guardians down, the overall strength of the group has been reduced to 80%. As someone not an original Guardian herself, Violetta's radius would normally span 5 miles. But again, due to this reduced power of the Pentaviv Guardians, her nullification aura is reduced to 4 miles.
Still, this ability has caused the rest of the world to hail the Guardians as beacons of hope. Their mere presence in their respected regions meant less of a strain on their burdens.
Their popularity would grow, which also meant the Guardians would feel tugged in every direction in order to fairly help everyone in their region as equally as possible. The Guardians felt that it would be best to keep the details of their adventure as vague as possible. They didn't feel that it was wise to divulge every detail to the general public.
Haliserre, Therin, Kuzland. In High Ever, a funeral service will be held for Haliserre, Pentaviv Guardian of Fire, sister of the Chantry, devout daughter of Andraste, and the last known member of the Therin bloodline. Mother Malal will administer the rites, and everyone whom she impacted will be in attendance, including Fergus Kuzlin, Samson Ilak, Old Man Tangerine, and many others. As Chantry tradition, Haliserre's body will be cremated, and her ashes placed at the base of the tree that still stands where the Kuzlin estate used to be, the tree where Haliserre and Andrea first met as children. Although she no longer remains part of the living, her service and ideals will be remembered. Though she did not always see eye to eye with the rest of the party, the Guardians wished to remember the why of her actions over the actions themselves. A memorial will be placed at her final resting spot, where cocoa beans will be planted surrounding the tree. Curiously, as if her ashes themselves willed it so, the cocoa beans would flourish despite the diminished effects of the Earth region. Those who knew Hali would like to believe that she joined Andraste with a Maker, at least for the time being. Although they all feel a noticeable change in their overall powers with her gone, they believe that one day they will feel a rise of new power, one marked with a star on their hand.
Andrea Stormbringer Therin. Andrea decides to settle in Ravane because the people in Ravane do not follow the Chant of Light. They do not require their mages to stay in the circle. Once they pass the harrowing, they're allowed to live as free people in the population. So she joins the circle, asking Cedric personally to administer her harrowing. Unsurprisingly, Andrea passes with flying colors. She easily is able to find a comfortable place in Ravane and keeps the Navaran Illuvion there. Even though Andrea's region is one of the larger parts of the world, she also has it slightly easier than the others. She ingeniously can weave her brace's abilities into a weather spell. She would travel between Ravane, Antiva, and the Free Marches, so that for at least one day a month in every country there was a torrential downpour of clean water for 8 hours. As you may notice, she purposely stays away from Parvolin, not surprisingly, a move that definitely makes her extremely unpopular in that region. It is probably safe to say that this unpopularity would result in some action against her eventually, but Andrea is smart and probably would expect this coming. She would be ready. Cain is still likely a thorn in Andrea's side. She assumes that he will be hunting her, so she will try to address this preemptively. In return, for large quantities of clean water, a rare commodity in Antiva now, Andrea will hire the Antivan crows to take care of this little problem. A month later, the crows will inform her that the contract is complete and Cain has been assassinated. She considers that a favor to both Theoben and her sister. Andrea will hire spies to infiltrate the Archon's palace and see if Bostwick is still alive. The spies scour the premises up and down, and they come up with no sign of Bostwick. They do locate his staff in the Archon's laboratory, implying that Bostwick did turn himself in, but no body or record of his execution was ever discovered. Even more bizarre was that all his servants mysteriously were missing without a trace. Such a mystery will certainly weigh heavily on Andrea, who was wishing to find closure on her father. But it is likely that the answer to this mystery will be revealed in due time.
Cedric Ashwood. Cedric continues to dedicate his life serving his maker as a Templar. He will station himself in the White Spire, where he will be heavily involved with training new Templar recruits in the Phalanx formations. This will include halberd training, as well as focusing on strength, endurance, and self-discipline. Most of the recruits whine and groan at Cedric's staircase workout routine, but Cedric is resolute in requiring all of them to follow in his footsteps, literally. People all about Orlais will always know where Cedric is, as they will visually see storm clouds part in the distance as he journeys through the region. Cedric will also apply his knowledge of his halberd to create lightning rods and spread them around the towns and cities to prevent damaging lightning strikes. Cedric will also keep his blade, a second chance, mounted on his wall as a reminder of how he is using the second chance that he has been given, despite the fact that it was unsolicited. With Cerberus' personal recommendation, Cedric is bound to rise in the ranks of the Templar Order quickly. Most of his Templar brothers and sisters that get to know him over the years believe that he has what it takes to eventually become the future Knight Vigilant, or even the right hand of the Divine herself. It goes without saying that Cedric was relieved that he didn't get assigned Tevinter as his regent. Speaking of Tevinter, the Archon recently became dishonorably discharged after he was discovered to be a serious tax fraud offender. His credibility was further diminished when documentation was found proving that he was not actually a Tevinter-born citizen. The Archon is sent to prison with a fate worse than death, complete humiliation in the public eye. It is inevitable that someone will replace him who is just as rotten as Archon Radonus, but at least we can still enjoy his plight in the meantime. Being the type of people that they are, Cedric and Andrea made it a point to ask for a special permission from the Circle concerning their budding relationship. With Gwenaël as newly appointed first enchanter of the White Spire, who is known to have strong opinions about love, their request is granted. With a new life is short mentality, Cedric will propose to Andrea 8 months later. Though both will have many responsibilities that will require them to be apart, they will always find the time to reunite on a regular basis. Their love will grow and continue to overcome all obstacles. After all, Cedric is her home, and Andrea is his purpose.
Despite being widowed and having suffered a broken heart, Theo finds to his eternal relief the ability to love. He also hopes to have another child in the near future, a daughter that he shall name Hallie. With any luck, this child will not be conceived by that one memorable threesome with Razikale and Violetta. He'll also write a letter to Zelinda, apologizing once again for his behavior towards her. In addition, he will also write a letter to Cersei, insisting that Cersei treat Zelinda how he always should have treated her, with love, respect, and trust. Theoben and Cedric jointly agree on how to protect the Rite of Tranquility notes to prevent thievery in the future. The original notes are burned in a fire overseen by the two of them and no witnesses. In its place, an encrypted, coded version of the notes is created. They produce a key together, required to understand the notes, and this key is torn in half. Cedric keeps one piece, Theoben keeps the other, so that should anyone wish to disturb these notes, they would have to go through them. They felt it was fitting that should the secret be found, it cannot be unlocked without forcing it from Hugh's main two protectors. These encrypted notes are kept in the vault of Theoben Solney in Orzammar, defended by traps of deathroot grenades, crow poison, and hail's dust. He would ask Cogs to build an alarm in his vault that will alert him if his vault has been breached, seeing as some of his savings are being kept in there. Just savings. He will not be told about the safe that holds the right notes. After taking some time to grieve for Hallie, Theoben will return to Rosie to take her home to Orzammar. He will remind her of the promise he made, that he would always come back. He made good on that promise and devoted a large portion of his time to solely being a father for the first year that she comes home to live with him. Theoben will continue his work as a shopkeeper, Darkspawn ambassador, father, and guardian of the Pentavive, with regular visits to Ferelden to aid in the growth of its earth. Sanctioned by King Sunworth. This naturally takes up a lot of time, and fitting in visits to Ferelden, to the Darkspawn Tigers, and to King Kyne will sometimes take him away from home. But Rosie will be looked after by Uncle Janar in the meantime. Once he brings Rosie home, he will start to work on extending and improving his shop. He expands into healing substances and herbalism, which brings in enough revenue to turn his shop into a proper home for him and Rosie. His photo of the group with their Mass Effect friends sits proudly on his wall. He still keeps a stock of poisons locked up for a few trustworthy clientele. These are now all appropriately labelled. He keeps a spare room in his home for Hugh, Connor, or any of his adventuring friends should they wish to visit him in Orzammar, including his fellow guardians.
Kenna returns back to her people, victorious within the week's deadline given to her. As promised, the Eagle Reach Thane offers to step down to allow Kenna to become the new Thane of the Avar. However, Kenna informs him that he may keep his title as Thane, and that instead she would create a new position of leader of all Avar in order to help unite the people together again as one. This new position would be called the Matriarch, or Patriarch if a male holds the title. Candidacy would then be the result of earning the respect of the people, the Thanes, and the Holdbeast, very much of how Kenna earned it. Final candidates would be chosen by all the previous Matriarchs and Patriarchs. The position term only lasts 10 years. After their term, the Matriarch and Patriarch still hold respect and influence, but they lose their power. They must forfeit all other positions until their term is over, and the responsibilities include peace between the holds, foreign relations, and overall viability with the Avar land and people. Kenna's main goals during her term as Matriarch will include creating diplomatic relations with Ferelden, maintaining relations with the dwarves, assigning her mother as the Avar ambassador to Ferelden, establishing new settlement, to become the central location of Avar to live, and any outsiders wishing to trade or visit or even live will be welcome. Thanes would still rule their individual holds, but because the lands are still recovering from both blight and breach, they will be encouraged to move to this new settlement as a permanent residency. Territories will be divided to each hold, and each hold reports to the Matriarch. Using the alluvions, Kenna will divide her time between the people in Ferelden, those in need in her presence of central Thetis. She will also work with the farming areas only during the times of complete darkness to both Navara and to Winter. She will publicly work with the Navaran king, but she will secretly work into Winter too. Don't tell Cedric.
Violetta has very large shoes to fill in order to take over as the Pentavive Guardian of Fire for Haliserre. However, she is a quick study of her bracer and is ready to fulfill her necessary duties. Never having a permanent place prior to these events in the first place, Her people were happy to use their caravan to travel all around the region of diminished fire in order to aid the residents there. Violetta's biggest contribution to the Guardians is her newly acquired knowledge of the Alluvions. She would eventually unlock the secret of creating new Alluvions, as expensive and time-consuming of a process as it is for her, and their network within the Crossroads would expand. The mirrors would continue to help the Guardians travel from region to region with relative ease, faster than even Cog's airships. This would also allow them to see each other fairly regularly. Andrea would bestow Bostwick's staff to Violetta so she might have a key to the Alluvions. Andrea felt it was fitting, knowing Bostwick also meant something to her. Andrea will take more time to get to know her, and the two actually begin forming a good friendship. Violetta will also spend a lot of time visiting Theoben in particular. They go on their dinner date and end up enjoying each other's time. Neither necessarily seems to know for sure where this relationship will go, but Violetta is very understanding of Theoben's responsibilities and his priorities for being a good father to his daughter first and foremost. Something that does not go unnoticed by Theoben. He will respectfully give Theoben his space when needed, and will wait and see if a future time could possibly result into anything substantial. Theoben does enjoy having Violetta around and has even asked her to help homeschool Rosie when she's away from the Dwarf School of Magic. Violetta seemed to be a natural teacher after helping Razikale learn to speak.
Hugh. Between Cedric not trusting anyone to ensure Hugh is never taken advantage of for his gifts, and Hugh not trusting anyone else to protect him from said gifts, there is an unspoken understanding that the two will always remain at each other's side. Hugh's powers are very unique and full of mystery. The rest of Hugh's life will be ridden with constant attempts by others to harness his powers in unsavory ways. Cedric is determined to make sure that never happens, not just for Thetis' sake, but also for the sake of his best friend. The bond that has grown between them will ensure that they would always protect the other from harm. While Cedric now has a clearer picture of the person that he is, and Hugh has a much clearer picture of the person who he wants to be, both not quite tranquil and not quite cured, Hugh considers himself to be in a happy medium between the two. Of course, this doesn't mean that Hugh won't give Cedric and Andrea their space when one visits the other. He will loyally allow the married couple their time together, as it should be. Before it is time for both the Guardians of Air and Water to return back to their duties, each time Hugh swears to Andrea that he will personally ensure that Cedric makes it back to her again soon. Violetta, of course, teasingly asks Hugh often if any threesomes have occurred yet. Both knowing that she asks in jest, Hugh always responds by looking straight into Violetta's eyes and in a quiet voice saying, "You know I can replace you." Knowing that this is very true, especially if Cedric has anything to say about it, Violetta always lets the joke rest there. Hugh and Theoben will continue fostering a close relationship as well, as Theoben feels quite comfortable opening up to the semi-tranquil mage. He always has new paintings for Rosie, who seems to enjoy looking at the pictures of all the fantastic areas he visits. It's safe to say that despite everything, Hugh is very content. Not because he is tranquil, but because he generally feels it so.
Connor will ask Senior Enchanter Gwenail permission to visit Kenna frequently, and to ensure that the Avar are being treated fairly by the Ferelden's. Gwenail of course grants him his wish, informing him that he fully understood if some of those excursions required Connor to be taken away for months at a time. Regardless, no matter how distant he may be at times, Kenna knows that Connor will always be supportive and true to her. Kenna will not commit to anything more until her term as matriarch is over, Fortunately, for both, it will take that amount of time before Connor can have permission to leave the circle indefinitely. At that point, both will be allowed to further their relationship to the next level. But in the meantime, Connor will be there by her side, often to aid her in both Ferelden, Navara, and even, much to his discomfort, to Winter. Plus, thanks to Violetta, the two will be connected by Alluvion during times where Connor must stay at the circle.
Owlett. Kenna will offer Owlett and his Silven clan to live with within the Avar lands. Owlett will graciously accept, especially if they can somehow help with the restoration of the Ferelden Earth. Theoben will insist on officiating the first formal wedding between two Silvens, Owlett and Laquisha. Though Owlett himself found such tradition rather odd, Laquisha was interested in giving it a try. One thing's for sure, it was certainly the most bizarre wedding any of the Guardians had ever attended. Owlett finds himself extremely happy to find more of his own. And over the years, the grove will spread as more Silvens join. Acorn will eventually find a mate of its own, complementing the grove with a large family of owls as well. One great boon is that if the borders of Ferelden are ever threatened, the Silven Grove will be the first line of defense.
Razikale will return back to a newly established home for her people in a tag closer to Orzammar. She had learned during her time with the Pentavive Guardians, but the most valuable thing that she gained was the hope that the alliances, even friendships, could even be forged for those outside of her own. Roughly 1 month after her return, she was pleasantly surprised to find the Black King on his way back into the Darkspawn city. She was also unpleasantly surprised that Aaron Cobb is still with him. I guess you can't have everything. All kidding aside, Aaron will remain loyal servant to the Black King and will remain committed to reaching out with Fergus to recruit more Grey Wardens for the Awakening. The Guardians have informed the Black King of the events that transpired in the breach. As far as they know, Corypheus was not involved. Didn't have to do anything to it, at least not directly. But this does not mean the Black King won't still be vigilant. The Lyrian bomb beating in his heart may still be needed in the future time. But for now, he knows that the Architect will need more of his help and to lead their people into the new age. After forming the alliance with not only the Dwarves but only with the Pentavive Guardians as well, the Black King is pleased to see that his wish for a new beginning for the Darkspawn might finally come true. Oh, right, and the Black King personally requested to give Andreia away at hers and Cedric's wedding. Perhaps he thinks himself as Andreia's long-lost uncle figure.
King Kyne. Theoben will inform King Kyne about the events that occurred at the breach, as well as an explanation of the aftermath. With Theoben's permanent residence still in Orzammar, the Dwarven city will fortunately not be affected by the worldwide changes nearly as much. Theoben will use his connection to King Kyne to deliver a compelling argument for the complete destruction of the Anvil of the Void, citing the Fifth Blight as a prime example of how it could very well destroy the Dwarven race. Unfortunately, Theoben will not be pleased with King Kyne's response. As you and I both know, good friend, a flask of alchemical poison is a dangerous venture. In the wrong hands, it can be used to terrible effect, and to seek terrible ends. It can even be a danger to the one using it. But in proper hands, with the proper knowledge, seeking the right and proper ends, it can prove an invaluable tool in achieving a greater good. In our recent past, the Anvil of the Void has been used improperly by misguided minds. While I have no intention of its use, and would only ever do so as a last and final resort, I've never been one to throw away an ace up my sleeve when it comes to my survival, and now that of my people. You can keep it safe, secure it as thoroughly as you desire, but we will not cast away the anvil, if it has any potential for good still left within it. As King Kyne's personal ambassador, Theoben keeps in regular contact with the Architect in the Darkspawn community. The Architect will remain true to the terms of their alliance, providing Orzammar with lyrium and other minerals they discover within the Deep Roads, in return for allowing them to be left alone to establish their new home there. In addition, Orzammar will see a sudden decline in violent Darkspawn activity near the city, as the Architect's people act as a first line of defense against the unawakened. Such things will allow Orzammar to regain its rise, since Branka's rule, in much faster time than before. Obviously, this alliance will need to remain a secret from the general dwarven population. Many of King Kyne's radical decisions are still unpopular to traditionalist dwarves, though he still maintains a high level of approval rating from the majority. Still, if Kyne plays his cards right, in the long term he believes that both dwarves and Darkspawn could coexist, eventually allowing the dwarves to expand their empire and regain the lost Taigs, and possibly the entire Deep Roads as a whole, once again. Fortunately for the Darkspawn, bananas are not a commodity that they can provide. Otherwise, all bets would be off.
Navara took the brunt of the damage done by the breach and was left heavily warped. Structures and land masses were reshaped in ways that would be unrecognizable to those native to the area. Many Navarans died with the demons pouring down from the rift. However, thanks to the help of Simon and the rest of the Navaran Templars, most were given time to escape to neighboring lands. Now Navarans knew firsthand how the Ferelden's felt during the Blight. Many would return to help rebuild their homes. Fortunately, the destruction was not as significant as the effects of the Blight, but it definitely struck a major blow to the country, especially with two powerful countries, Owlett and Violeta, watching from nearby. Fortunately, 3 months of continual darkness and 3 months of continual air were things that the citizens could more easily adapt to than degrade water, air, or land. Unfortunately, not bad news, though King Marcus was taken out of the city, he did not return back to his country. With no heirs and only a brother uninterested in the throne, the seat of power was open for the taking. While the Ferelden election process was relatively orderly, the path to acquiring a new king for Navara was not nearly as peaceful by comparison. The new ruler of Navara would not be as reasonable as Marcus. The type of ruthlessness that Marcus feared would succeed him. As promised, Tessa would be invited by Andrea to join her in, by Tessa's surprise, in Ravine. Tessa would take Andrea up on that offer, where she would be helped by Andrea to fully understand what she is. Tessa appreciates Andrea and Cedric always reminding her that she is indeed a person. She and Andrea will form a close relationship. Tessa will spend the rest of her time focusing on reaching out to wayward spirits that escaped from the breach, helping them cope with life on the other side. Her actions will prevent these spirits from becoming demons.
Rovas Anjasdan, Uigal Reach. Eric will awaken back in his body in the infirmary of the White Spire, unfortunately with his spell arm amputated near the elbow. The damage done to his arm was too great to be undone. Kenna will be there when he awakens to explain to him all the events he missed since trying to cure Haliserre of her curse. A little worse for wear, Eric will live. The fact that he lost so much after trying to do so much to help others will still eat away at him for years to come. But he will put those feelings aside, for the most part, to help Kenna lead the Avar as a matriarch. With her mother and cousin presumed dead, Rovas considered there to be nothing tying her to Eagle's Reach anymore. She quite frankly doesn't see Frostguide as her Thane. Instead, she takes off with her father, Arlen, to continue her studies and research into medicine and healing. Ari will accompany her, as difficult as it is for him to be apart from the rest of his family, though he will visit them often whenever they happen to be near Whitevale Hold. Eventually Rovos will become family, much to Kenna's chagrin.
Samson Alok. Shortly after separating from Haliserre and Theoben, Plim and Samson will eventually find Queen Jody, kicking some serious demon butt, might I say, while waiting for them to reunite. They would join in on the fight at the breach, right up to the point of its closing. After losing his dearest friend, Serena, there wasn't really much left holding Samson back in Orlais. Giving it much thought, Samson decides to leave his life as a mercenary to take up Theoben's offer to work with him at his shop. This was an incredible help for Theoben, with him trying to balance his duties as both as a father to Rosie and an ambassador with the Darkspawn. Samson's employment for Theoben came with one condition: that he would be able to visit his own father weekly. Fully understanding the importance of a father catching up with a child, Theoben finds no issue with these terms. Fortunately, Orzammar is a lot closer to New Denerim than Orlais, making this arrangement make even more logical sense. As challenging as it is for Rosie and Theoben to establish their bonds, it is even more awkward for Plim and Samson. Samson is a constant reminder of the woman he once loved deeply, and the life he could have had if things worked out differently. But Plim tries very hard to be whatever Samson needed for him. For now, Samson is content with where he is in life, but who knows if his services as the youngest assassin of Orlais will be needed again.
Gerard Payne. Payne's practical products has become a household name across Ferelden, Navara, and Orlais. Even when it seemed the world would meet its inevitable doom, Malcolm and Gerard continued to maintain the economic bloodline through their trade. They were there for their citizens, even during the apocalyptical turmoil. Perhaps some of the Pentavive Guardians' influence inspired them to maintain their hope and bravery. Gerard would take very good care of Archer's bow, an exceptionally crafted weapon. Gerard took to it almost instantaneously, as if its previous owner shaped it to be a perfect fit for him. Malcolm ends up investing in Cog's airship project, which results in an incredible source of revenue that elevates them to one of the top merchants in all of Thedas. Several chain stores will open across the land, and their brand will be regarded as some of the highest quality. Malcolm continues to help his son prepare to take over the growing business once he passes on. But in the meantime, his father tries to invest in pushing Gerard to find a wife of his own and hopefully make way for even more inheritors of their legacy.
Lithia Ashala. The Pentavive Guardians will personally see to it that the Elven Arrow of Hate and the Arrow of Love are returned back to Lithia. They also return back to her the remains of the Shadowed Orb of Destruction. Lithia makes it her personal quest to seek out Rosin's associates in order to determine the best way to keep these artifacts safe from the wrong hands. Details of this will most likely arise at a later time. As a favor to Rosin, Lithia will take it upon herself to be the next guardian of the Chamber of the Sleeping Dread Wolf. Her grandfather, Old Man Tangerine, will join her in order to make up for all the lost time their family had. Together, they will often visit Owlett and Acorn at the Silven Grove, for they too have become an extended part of the family. It is still unknown if she ever finds some resolution with her clan, assuming she is even looking for such resolution. The good news is, though, Lithia most likely still has much of her story to tell.
Faith. You can imagine the shock that Zerlinda receives when Rosie finally introduces Faith to her. Of all the fantastical things she's seen, Faith definitely ranks the highest on her list. But then again, magic casting dwarves is also an extremely shocking concept to the world. Given time, Zerlinda will grow to trust Faith, especially since her very existence, too, needs to remain hidden and secret just like the rest of the dwarves. Thetis isn't ready for magic-casting dwarves, just as much as it isn't ready for beings from the stars. The children take a liking to Faith almost immediately. With Faith's talents and biotics, she becomes an invaluable teacher to not only the children, but Zerlinda herself as well. Over time, Faith will also learn the common tongue. Speaking of tongues, an unrelated excursion brings a certain half-elf cook into the mines. Faith will immediately recognize Archer, whom she had been searching for ever since she arrived at Thetis. After recovering from the sheer shock of seeing her again, two share a close embrace. Aww. From that moment forward, Archer will make top-secret visits to the mines whenever the Tempest Stream passed by. Fortunately for him, Captain Maelstrom trusts in him implicitly and allows him to do so without asking too many questions. Plus the fact that Cox himself is also aware of the situation down there. Not only has Faith managed to find her purpose in this world, she has also found the happiness she had sacrificed everything for.
Although Maximilian earned a great achievement in becoming the new democratically elected king of Ferelden, he ended up inheriting a lot more than he bargained for. Despite the fact that the breach was closed, the Ferelden land goes from bad to worse. Within months, all of Ferelden becomes desert-like. Not due to lack of water or drying out, but due to the land quality diminishing severely, to the point that it is incredibly infertile. Most areas in the region of Diminished Earth were not hit nearly as hard, but due to the recent effects of the blight on the land prior, Ferelden got the shortest end of the stick. Maximilian will listen patiently when the Pentaviv Guardians report back to him about the choice they had to make in order to save all of Thedas. He was one of the very few that the Guardians voluntarily provided such complete information. Though it inadvertently placed him and his people in a very compromising position, he can't help but remember that he and his own group, too, had to make a similar difficult choice for the greater good. A decision that he doesn't regret making, though it still ultimately cost the lives of hundreds. Appreciating their candidness, Maximilian quickly comes up with a plan with his advisors. Fortunately for them, clean water is still in great abundance in Ferelden, and since their neighboring countries are in great need of such a resource, their water supply will be a major bargaining chip for trade with the diminished region of water. Water that they will use to keep their still fertile lands growing food that can be then traded back to Ferelden. In addition to finding creative ways to address the infertile land problem, Maximilian will also invest heavily in Cox's airship project. A land that controls airships also controls trade. Trade that is important not only between Ferelden, but all nations worldwide. Not to mention the number of new jobs that would open up as a result. This was something he was planning to fund anyway while he was Viscount of Kirkwall. And he would use much of the funds from Kirkwall as seed money instead of dipping into the limited coffers of Ferelden. In return, Kirkwall would be the first to benefit from trade powered by Cox's new fleet of merchant airships. All this would be enough to keep Ferelden on the map and be at least on par with the rest of the world adapting to the changes. Cox will also be able to build Maximilian his own personal royal airship, Final Judgment. And speaking of Kirkwall, with permission from the Chantry, Maximilian will appoint Sir Delrin Barris as his successor as Viscount. Sir Barris will be honored to fill in his shoes and accept. As promised, Maximilian will establish the Lawbringer Academy, placing Sir Kauthrian at the head. During this crisis, he is going to look for people that excel and contemplates them for Lawbringers, as he considers these trying times a great test for everyone involved. Believing that the Qunari are pretty mechanically advanced, he would consider Parvolen when thinking about trading airships in exchange for food and resources. Since Parvolen is lacking much help from Andreia, such a deal is one they can hardly refuse. Hopefully, arming Parvolen with an airship or two will not come back to haunt the rest of Thedas. But at the very least, Ferelden would still be favored in their eyes.
Right after the New Dinnerem lands meet, Gwynneo contacts and joins up with his love, Theoben. The two of them plunge head first into the Fade Bubble to find out what can be done. While inside, the merging causes Nathan to be forcibly separated from Gwynneo, back into the Fade. Fortunately, Evelyn and his shard managed to help guide them to Tessa, who was helping Nathan reunite back with them. Shortly after things die down, the first enchanter passes away. A great funeral is held for their fellow brothers. Not much to many people's surprises, Gwynneo is made his successor. Gwynneo will continue to lead the mages in the White Spire, and he will serve the Circle Council to help advise the Archmages. Knowing how ambitious he is by now, many people expect Gwynneo to vie for the Grand Enchanter position itself. But in the meantime, First Enchanter Gwynneo will be informed of what exactly happened to Thedas after the breach was closed. And, as we all know, fixing the world is something Gwynneo cannot resist from doing. He will pull all of his resources he has to address the shortcomings of each region. That will be his main project for the next several years. He will try to pull in cogs to come up with technological advancements that will aid in his efforts. However, since Cogs will have his hands full helping Maximilian and Ferelden, he will instead offer to provide his father, Cersei, at his disposal. The father and son reunited recently, and although Cogs is arguably has more potential than his father, Cersei is a brilliant mind whose ingenuity will be an invaluable asset to Gwynneo.
Immediately after the lands meet at New Dinnerem, Leoden returned back to the Divine to report on the new King of Ferelden. He also informs the Divine about his suspicions amongst a member of their ranks, Seeker Sevian Hennick. An investigation ensues, and with the help of Violetta, Sevian is found guilty of numerous shady acts. He is immediately stripped of his Seeker position and sentenced to prison for killing an entire village of innocent people. With Cain being taken care of by the Antivian Crows, Sevian has nobody to bail him out of his mess this time. Hopefully, this will allow Haliserre an even more peaceful rest. Leoden musters up the courage to seek out Andreia. He offers to take her out for coffee, and it's a rather pleasant conversation. But alas, Leoden was a little too late, as Andreia had recently started seeking the affections of someone else. She lets him down lightly, however. Such is one of the many sacrifices that a left hand of the Divine must accept. Being so dedicated to his job leaves very little time to pursue such personal things most everyone else takes for granted. Companionship is a luxury that is difficult to maintain in his high position. Also, how ironic would it be that the person that ended up stealing Andreia's heart away from him could possibly serve as the next right hand of the Divine? For now, Leoden's only true partner is Alexandra. With people still skeptical about a Qunari in such a high position, Leoden has a lot to overcome in order to gain the respect of those anxious of him. But between Nemetos, his friends, and the countless lives he's made a difference in, Leoden is ready to continue proving his worth.
Before we close, it's also worth mentioning that amidst all the serious duties and bureaucracy that the Pentavive Guardians have on their plate, there was one special fun project that they all came up with. They made up plans to create an amazing new venue carved into the mountainside of Amaranthine. This would include a road down to the Deep Roads and a mountain path up to the Frostbacks. With the help of his bracer, Theo takes a couple months to sculpt and shape the foundation for this structure.
The venue would be known as The Breach. And it would be an all-inclusive experience that features an inn, a bar, and a restaurant. The Breach would be the home base of the operations for the Pentavive Guardians. Thanks to Violetta's growing network of Illuvians, each Guardian would have easy access between the region and the Breach. An official Payne's Practical Products gift shop would be included. Gerard and Malcolm Payne would be their silent partners.
The Brazy Breach will be the signature drink, super tropical and delicious, but there also will be other signature drinks for each member of the Pentavive. Theo's will be the Rock Slide, Cedric's will be the Ever Vigilant, Andrea's will be the Deep Freeze, Kenna's will be the Void, which is actually the most expensive drink on the menu, but it's an empty glass and all proceeds go to charity. And Violetta's will be the Cursed Flame, which you can actually light on fire. That turns a naturally violet colour when served. A commemorative drink for Haliserre will be called the Chocolate Queen. Delicious.
The Breach would serve food and drink from all over the world, all of their favorites. And there will be a tunnel path down to the water's edge where you can find a beautiful beach where tropical drinks are served and the weather is always serene. Even the rooms in the inn will be decorated by theme. And the beach is also a great place to have weddings, Cedric and Andrea's being the first.
So, another chapter in our world of Thetis has come to a close. Although the world itself would be forever changed, our heroes still managed to achieve many successes, and their influence on the world would continue to grow over time. Such changes will also be a breeding ground to give rise to new heroes in the future. That's just what balance is all about. Balance demands the rises in additions to the falls across time. And when that next rise happens, you can be sure that Thetis will undergo yet another resurgence.